Hello, my name is Gabrielle O'Hare, and this is the first series of menopause motivation. And a little bit about me: I'm 53, I'm a personal trainer based in the UK, and menopause motivation has emerged from my own journey through menopause and midlife. And I would say this is something that I've been conscious of maybe for the past 7 years, once I recognised that I was probably going through menopause, but also recognising that I was in midlife. And I see those things as quite different because, on one sense, menopause is a set of physical symptoms that we get to experience when we go through that whole process of perimenopause and menopause. But there's something different that sits alongside that, which I think is equally challenging. And that's this sense of being in midlife and how our life starts to change all around us. And goes beyond just what's changing from through our hormones. And for me, events that happened that sort of summed up what was going on with that was just probably really getting a sense of feeling dissatisfied with my life, which was something I felt really guilty about because I had a lot going for me and there was a lot of things in it that I loved, but I was starting to feel tired of it, like it just wasn't quite enough. There was just some sort of unease appearing inside me that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I really didn't understand. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I think it goes to the fact that we get to a point in our lives when stuff's changing. And like many of you, will have gone through some big shifts of things happening to us. My dad died. I lost my job, lost a few jobs, careers ending, careers changing, and started to feel like I wanted something different for myself, but not knowing what. I've got one child, I had two stepsons. Both were getting to the point where I knew that they were going to be older and I would have more time and more freedom. But at the same time, I still had children to look after. I still had a mortgage to pay. I still had a pension that wasn't big enough. So there was this really desire to change, but a couple of things. One, I didn't know what I wanted, and even if I had, I wouldn't have known how to get there because, and this is where I think menopause really exacerbates things, is life felt so intense. It felt so difficult to keep the plate spinning. So that took so much time and energy that I couldn't ever even work out what I wanted. And that was a deeply frustrating period. And I think as well, feeling that you are maybe dissatisfied with your life or resentful of it, that brings up some sensations of guilt. I felt guilty, ungrateful. How could I be unhappy when I had a family that I loved, when I had a lovely home in a nice area? But it was overwhelming because I just couldn't make sense of all these feelings. And and on the top of that, you have all the menopause symptoms of energy going up and down and mood changes. I'm lucky I never had problems with sleep, but I blame that in part for the fact that I just had the most insanely overactive mind that I couldn't quieten down and would leave me feeling deeply overwhelmed at times and feeling like a rabbit in the headlights, not knowing what to do, but knowing I had a list of long of my arm and just couldn't even hope to get through it or know where to start with it. But in all that confusion of all those symptoms that I couldn't manage and all those things happening that I couldn't control and all the emotions that I didn't understand, there was something, and that I was determined that I was going to figure out what was going on, and I was determined to get to the other side. And I very much developed this mindset around this menopause midlife journey that it was a transition. And I knew, despite all the things that were happening to me, I wasn't ready to start winding down or slowing down. I did have to slow down, but like mentally, I wasn't ready for my life to sort of gradually get less interesting or less exciting. And I really wanted to believe and see that this period of intense difficulty for lots of reasons was actually a door opening onto a future. And that's what I wanted to believe. And I wanted to understand how to get through that. There was a time when I had this word pop into my head, a midlife transition, and I remember Googling it and I couldn't work out I didn't understand what it meant. I don't remember that I'd ever read it, but I knew I wanted one. I knew I really wanted a midlife transition. And that's this idea of a door opening and that there's something new and exciting to look forward to. And that's where I started from. A friend who spent a lot of time in Turkey, and she told me a lovely thing that in Turkey there's no word for autumn. It's called the second spring. And that's what this felt like. It felt like rather than thinking I was going into an autumnal phase of my life, now my birthday's in autumn, so I should like autumn very much. I didn't see it as appealing as the idea of going into a second spring. But that's really where I wanted to be. That's where my mind was going. And I think if that's what you want and that's what you obsess about and that's what you're determined to achieve, then you get there because you then start to make that happen. And the second spring was really embracing the sense of free, or not even the sense, the real freedom that I had, but also making sure that I was as strong and fit and healthy as I could be to be able to capitalize on this period of my life where I knew menopause symptoms would subside. I knew I'd make some sense. I knew I'd somehow get my life back together. Um, but I needed physical and mental strength to do that. And when, something that I think happens at this stage of our lives as well is we suddenly start to think about the future and our health. And we lose people. There are people in our lives that don't get this far and or don't get far enough. And we start to face up a little bit to our own mortality. And that can be scary to think about sometimes. But what that instilled in me was a sense of not wanting to waste the time I had. When I think now I'm 53, and if I was chatting to my mum, she would say, "Oh, well, you're young." And I thought, yeah, well, that's a good way of looking at it. It's not going to get better than it is now. So I might as well really try and capitalize on this. And when we get to this stage of our lives, there are a lot of things that we have to face up to that we know that with absolute certainty how our body is changing. And I hate to use the word declining, but if we just let nature take its course, then there are certain things that would happen to our body and our health that would start to go into a period of decline. And that made me think, well, I have two choices. I either sit back and let that happen and just cruise into whatever happens to me and not try and fight it's not the right word, but minimize it. Or, I do everything I can to slow down or even reverse those changes that happen to our body, because that's also possible too with nutrition and exercise. In a way, that's the harder path because you have to be prepared to make effort and do hard things and make sacrifices and compromises and changes. But that was the choice that I took because I was very conscious that modern life means that we don't have time or energy for exercise. Menopause was a time where I fell out of love with exercise as well. So I went through a phase of having a lot of injuries, a lot of aches and pains, losing my confidence to exercise, losing my motivation to exercise. I didn't want to do any, so I didn't. And there's also another thing that I gravitated towards, which was food and comfort eating. That's something that is really common. We live in a world where we're very much encouraged to have a little bit of what we fancy and, not, relax and treat ourselves, but that can very easily take over. And it did for me. And one of my clients sent me a message yesterday, a little quote. I don't know where she got it from. I should check, but saying that we eat for comfort and refuge, for joy and escape. And that's very much where I was, and far too much of it as well. So, it's difficult because you recognize that there are things we should be doing to have a stronger and healthier future. But then the other side of that coin is that we really struggle because our lives are so hard. And this is something that I have been acutely aware of both in myself and continue to be today, but also with the women that I work with, is this huge struggle between intention and knowing we should do the right thing, but just being absolutely unable to make it happen. And I think women do experience some very unique circumstances when we get to this age or this life stage. And that's we just feel like we have so much on our plate. Our lives are so complicated. Menopause makes it so difficult for us to have the mental and physical energy to get through the things we feel that we have to do, that we don't have enough time for ourselves and to do the things that we want to do for us. And that just gets put on the back burner. And that can get put on the back burner for decades with disastrous consequences. And sadly, I've seen that. I've seen that in in women and clients that I've worked with whose health has just got so bad it becomes really difficult to turn around, all because they couldn't prioritize themselves. And I don't want to sort of make that seem too light, the fact that how difficult things are. It's a real problem that we can battle with and battle with for years. As women, our hormones, our moods, our energy levels can just go up and down, and we just don't know where we are from day to day. We can have a really good run where we feel like we're on top of everything, and then we have a few bad sleeps, or there's some drama at home or at work, and everything collapses. And we really get exhausted by being on this cycle of feeling in and out of control, and that deep frustration of feeling like we're on the back foot all the time. And like I say, that can go on for years. So it's a really difficult thing to escape. But that's what menopause motivation is for. It's for anyone who's stuck in that cycle, but determined to break out of it and achieve something that might have eluded you for decades. And that's to be able to take proper care of yourself, to learn what your body needs to thrive, to build up the strength and power, and start to feel fully in control of your body, your mind, and ultimately your life. And if I had to sort of say what is menopause motivation and how would I define what that is, part of it is taking back control of your life. We get squeezed out of our own lives very, very easily, and that starts to accelerate when we get into midlife. When we're younger, we are going through the motions of getting into our careers, having houses, finding life partners, having children, things that we really want and things that we're really able to make happen. But then they start to overtake us, and the external pressures start to bombard us, and we just have no time for ourselves. But what's worse than that is that not only do we not have time, we lose a sense of what we want. And again, this was something that I became really conscious of over just a really simple comment that my partner made once, or a question really. And he said, yes, let's go out for a meal tonight. Where would you like to go? And I remember thinking, I have got no idea. I don't even know. I can't even answer that question. Where would I like to go for a meal tonight? And that really shocked me because my default was to say back to him, oh, I don't mind. What do you fancy? And because in that, it was easier for me to let him make the decision. It was more comfortable for me to think that he would be eating somewhere that he would be happy with, rather than me risk making the wrong choice, having what I wanted, and then having to worry about him wishing I'd gone somewhere else. So there's a couple of things here. One is this mental madness of just making a simple decision so much more difficult than it needs to be, and imagining some negative scenario come out of me making that decision, and two, not even knowing what I wanted. And when I sat back and thought about that, that really shocked me. And I wanted that to change. I wanted to start to, one, be able to prioritize myself, and I wanted to start to know what made me tick. What did I want? What did make me happy? What did I enjoy? What was going to make me feel excited about my life and want to get out of bed in the morning? Because for a long time, nothing did. It just felt like it was a struggle to make one day, get through one day intact. And that's all I would think about, was just get through the day, get through the next day, and then years disappear. So that's what that was about. It was taking back control of me, starting to prioritize my health, starting to get back in tune with me and what I want, and starting to know myself. But not only that, giving myself permission to go after it. Because again, and I think a lot of people relate to this, tend to be a people pleaser. I'd rather do something that I think will make somebody else happy than do what I want. Or if I want to do something for myself, I'll ask permission. I mean, why would we be asking permission in our own homes when we're in our late 40s, 50s, and 60s? It's crazy. But we're actually asking permission to do things. And we shouldn't need to. We should be able to just do stuff that what we want for ourselves. And this isn't about suddenly abandoning all our responsibilities, because we can't. It was about just being able to carve out a little bit of time in the day, in the week for me, that was going to help me just get to know myself a little bit better and learn what I needed. And taking back control also included, I've always really passionately believed throughout my life that food and fitness have a massive impact on how we feel, how we function, how we operate. And I won't go into it here, but I've had so many personal experiences of that since I was in my 20s, of how changing my diet, starting exercise has transformed anything from my energy levels to my mood to my motivation to my stamina to how much my brain fog I have, how well I can concentrate in the afternoon. And I've always believed that to be true and experienced that to be true. So I had a huge amount of respect for the value of these things in my life. And I started to appreciate that now that was more important than ever, to be able to build a solid nutrition plan into my life and to build a solid fitness and health and strength plan into my life. That's the principle. The execution's a lot harder, but that was a start to recognize that was important. So it was bringing that back in as a pillar in my life. But what was quite interesting as I went through that journey was, even though I had clarity about what I wanted to be doing and the intention to do it, and seemingly the motivation to do it for what I've talked about, actually the day-to-day execution was still really hard. But again, that's something that Menopause Motivation is going to talk about in a lot more detail in future episodes, because I've just been obsessed with understanding what that is since I started this journey. What are the things that prevent us from doing the things we want to do? Why is it so hard to have a plan, to know what we want, but not be able to make it happen? And that is not do our workouts, not stick to the food that we want to eat, be at the mercy of cravings and making food choices that don't help our health, that don't make us feel good in our head, that don't help us hit our goals. So that's been a huge part of this journey as well. And what I started to realize quite late on, actually, sort of late on in the process, was at first I started to just think about a healthy diet, doing exercise, getting physically stronger, getting fitter. Then I started to realize how important mental strength was. Because, as I mentioned, when you deviate from a plan, it's to do with your mind. It's to do with something going on in your head that's stopping you from being able to do what you say. And mental strength then was another word that popped into my head, that I thought, I want to be mentally strong, without even really understanding what mental strength meant or what it was. But now I understand it, to be able to put up with hard things, to be able to endure things that are taking the harder path. So that might be doing a workout when I could think of something better to do, pushing myself a little bit harder in that workout when I do it, when I'm not really enjoying it, not giving in to cravings when I've had a bad day. Sometimes I'll win, sometimes I'll lose. But mental strength is about all of that. It's about having the discipline to put that plan in place and work towards it. It's about having the discipline to get back on it when you have a few days off because you've struggled, because you've had a bad week, because you've been ill, a holiday, whatever. It's being able to struggle some days, but then come back stronger the next day and carry on. That's what mental strength is. It's resilience. It's having the mindset and the determination to keep going. And that has been something that I have found the most valuable part of this, and a hugely valuable asset, which I still am working on and cultivating to this day. Certainly haven't cracked it. But the point is, without mental strength, you can't do all of the things that you want to do, and certainly can't do them all consistently enough to make change happen, to feel fitter, to feel stronger, to feel healthier, to lose body fat if you put body fat on. And that mental strength has a massive role in our determination to follow through on the things that we want to do and make it happen, put yourself at the top of your priority list. Without mental strength, you won't assert yourself. You will give in to other people. You won't set boundaries. You won't say no. And if, as women, we want to create this stronger, healthier, fitter future for ourselves that's geared around us and us doing what we want solely because we deserve it, then we need mental strength. We also need to cultivate self-awareness to learn about when we struggle, why we're struggling. Again, a pattern that I would have fallen into for many, many years would be when I struggle, blame myself, give myself a really hard time. And I see that so often. One of the things that always struck me when I first started in my job as a PT, when I retrained, in fact, 5 years ago, was people would come to me saying, I need to lose weight, but I'm really lazy and I'm really unmotivated and I've got no willpower." And I thought, well, I've never met a lazy, well, woman in my life for a start, or unmotivated. Really, what they struggled with was being able to prioritize themselves or know what to do. And having self-awareness is massive because we have to learn what holds us back. And that's been a really interesting part of this journey. I started thinking the journey would be about eat right and do your workouts, but no, I had to learn about how I was holding myself back, what threw me off track. And the mindset shift that comes with that is about, rather than going when things don't go as you want, turn to a point of curiosity and learning and asking why. So instead of giving myself a hard time, I would sit down with a pen and paper. I'm a huge journaling fan. And I would think, why have I had such a tough few days? What's been going on? And I would dig into that and unpick it and then start to understand what was happening that meant it was hard for me to not give in to a takeaway or not dive into the cupboards in search of chocolate in a fit of frustration. And so understanding us, what makes us tick, what motivates us, what demotivates us, what builds our energy, what saps our energy, what throws us off track, what frustrates us, why we feel resentful, and how all of that links to how well we can stick to the plans that we want, has been a massive part of this journey. So cultivating self-awareness is huge. And what sits behind that, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again, is becoming your own priority. And I like to think of this now as Project Me. And I talk to my clients about that. So some of them are referring it to Project Me. And I like the idea of Project Me because it feels like it's a lifetime job. And I never used to understand. I knew what the words enjoy the journey meant. I never enjoyed the journey ever. I was always resentful of having to change. I was always desperate to be at the end. I was always focused on how far away I was and how difficult it felt. And a huge mindset shift has been to start to realize what enjoy the journey actually means. And that's been taking away a huge amount of pressure and expectation on myself and being able to change the pace and go easier, go slower, learn, refine, be more consistent, not be at the mercy of these huge swings of being good and being bad and having great weeks and then terrible months. Just started to level things out because I've started to look at the bigger picture more and see that wherever I am now is just one point in that journey and be happy with that, but also excited because I know there'll be a next stage and there'll be something else to work on. And that's been really nice because I think when you were younger, you didn't think like that. You just wanted to be thinner or wanted to run a half marathon. And then when that was gone, everything training would fall off a cliff. And now the idea that there's this continual journey and this continual opportunity for improvements, for change, for refinements, to discover new things is really lovely. And that's actually really exciting. And so having this idea of Project Me and being my own priority feels really indulgent. And it's a lovely thing to be able to do. And whilst there are many days where I'm frustrated, there are starting to be many more days where I really enjoy it. I enjoy what I learn. I enjoy my attitude towards myself. I'm starting to see changes, changes to my habits, to my body composition, to my confidence, to my ambition, to what I want to do in the future, and to be able to be assertive in the sense of knowing what I want, being able to go for it, and not asking for permission. And also a process which is hugely valuable. Because one thing that I've seen that women really want to do is we want to do more. We're very capable. We can do a lot of stuff. I think that's really hard baked into our identities because we've been doing so much for so long. But now I recognized I'd started to accumulate a lot of stuff that I didn't want to do. And then I began a process of letting go. So rather than trying to keep everything and all the roles, responsibilities, obligations, standards that I'd held on to really tightly, then trying to add on all this idea of doing more for myself and becoming my own priority was too much. I didn't have the energy for it anymore. I didn't have the capacity. I didn't have the will. There were things I'd used to do and felt like I had to do that I really realized I was only doing it for the sake of it. I didn't want to do it anymore. And after a period of feeling really bad about it and conflicted, I was able to start letting stuff go. That was a game changer. And that's what this process then allows you to do is start to make to cull, start to do different, allow yourself to start to find more time, let things go that aren't working for you. And with the time that you get from that, and not just physical time, but also headspace, you then start to feel, you start to understand what the next thing you need to do. You have more capacity to do the things that you want to, and you have more space in your mind to start to get a feeling for what you want to do, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel at your best. And you've got the mental capacity and awareness of yourself to guide you through what you want to do next and what you want to go for. And that's where it becomes really exciting. And so it's a lot. It's a really big area and it's a really exciting area. And I hope that this has given you a little bit of a taster of what menopause motivation means, what areas we can talk about together in the future, and how this might help you on your own journey to one, overcome the barriers you're facing, two, know that you're not alone, because I think very often we deal with all this hardship and internalize it, and we don't realize that other people are having similar experiences. And when we share them, there's a huge amount of comfort that can be taken from that. And that when I realized I wasn't the only person who was struggling, which I really did for a few years, then I realized that I wasn't the problem. And that's when I could start to look at other things and find answers and find solutions and start to move through it. So I hope very much that this will help you overcome those barriers, not feel alone, and help you to find the solution and the motivation that you need to commit to lifestyle changes that will transform your future too. And a lot of, or everything that I talk about in this series is going to be based on my own experience and also the experiences that I've seen from the now hundreds of women that I've worked with, either as a one-to-one personal training or coaching online over the past few years, and starting to see those patterns and starting to see what those shared experiences are. And that's been really fascinating. And I think that's also really valuable because when we start to see patterns and trends emerging, then that gives us valuable information that we can use to apply to our own circumstances and find a way through. So, thank you very much for listening in to this first episode. I'm going to be doing these every week. I'm saying this here so that I do it and I make it happen. And I hope to, yeah, I'd love to know your feedback on it. If you've got any questions, if there's anything that you want me to discuss, or even if you want to come on and have a chat with me, I think these are really always make it very enjoyable if we can have conversations together about the challenges that we're facing. So do get in touch with me if you would like to, have some suggestions or like to have a chat. So my email address is hello@gabrielleohare.com and I'll see you very soon. All right, thank you. Bye for now.